Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video we're going to tackle the next vintage pattern that I have on my list. It's going to be this one. If it will show it, just look at the green one because there it goes. So yes, so this is a original 1952 design and I love it. Like, I love the dress. So I have already mocked up the top to make sure that I have the correct size. I do need to shorten the waist just a little bit, but this is another one that I'm using a sheet that I found at the thrift store. I think I paid $3 for the sheet, and it's a twin size. So I had to rip out the side seams to get every last inch of the fabric that I could. I've already got the pattern pieces laid out on the sheet, so I can't show you the sheet here. So what I'll do is I'll swing the camera around to show you the sheet I'm talking about. But I'm really excited for this one. So anyway, let me swing the camera around and show you the fabric that we're working with. Okay, this is the fabric here. I absolutely love it. It's beautiful. It's mostly pink, but there is some purple in there as well and some green. So what I've done right here is I've just laid out the pattern pieces. I haven't pinned them, I haven't marked anything. I just wanted to make sure that they could actually fit. It was a tight squeeze, but it did. As you can see, it's just kind of laying here off of the end of the table because I wanted to make sure. So now that I know that it fits, let's get to cutting. Alright, I have most of the dress cut out. I went digging and I found this, which I believe is an old sheet as well. It had a seam here. There's another one that's identical on the other side, and both ends are selvage. Both edges are selvage. I went ahead and cut out the bodice pieces in that. So what I am going to do is I'm going to flatline the pieces together and treat them like one, but it will give it a little bit more structure, a little bit more. This is also a cotton sheet, so it'll be just as breathable. And then I'll just mark the darts on the back side of the pink instead of that, and then again treat it as one. Now that does mean that I'll have to figure out what type of seam finishings I want to do on the inside that isn't, you know, hiding it in between two layers of fabric, but I mean, that's fine. I don't mind doing that. I also do want to make a skirt piece out of this to have a lining for the skirt as well. So that's the plan. So yeah, let me get to basting and marking and I will check back. I have all of the bodice pieces flatlined, and I've gone ahead and done the darts on the back bodice and did the markings on the front bodice pieces. I don't know if you can see it, but it's with the blue chalk. So this has you start with the buttonholes, which I'm really excited. I've actually never done buttonholes like this before. So this is the facing piece for the buttons, and it's pinned right sides together to the front, and then I've marked the stitching lines, which I don't know if it's gonna show, if I can actually get it. They're blue. Yeah, you might be able to barely see them. Anyway, they're little boxes around, and then you slash the buttonholes and slash it up to the corners, and then turn this piece to the other side. And I've never done buttonholes like this before, so this is gonna be fun, and let's see how it goes. Okay, I'm going to see if I can show this. But here are my first two completed buttonholes. Now, I had to redo that one twice, and then I popped a stitch on this one, clipping the corners, and had to go re-sew it. These are tricky, but I like how they look. And it does say to whip stitch them closed for now, so, I mean, this is the first step of the dress, so I'm sure that there is a reason that I do not know of at this particular moment. I'm going to try to show what I did with the third one here. So I made sure you have to clip to the extreme corner without clipping your thread, because it doesn't work otherwise. But then you pull the fabric through to the back, and then I need to press that down. It does not give the best instructions. I'm going to say that about the pattern on how to best accomplish this. So I'm just going off of what I figured out worked. So with that down, I come over here and give it a press. And then I flipped it to this side, the right side, to make sure that it was indeed pressed well, and did another one. So, but I've got to get it looking like that. So what I did with these two, and it worked, so I'm going to do it again, is I folded this one side up completely with the edge of the seam and pressed it. Then it's extremely hot, turned it down about halfway, and I just kind of estimated, but then I came over with my clapper, if I can do it quickly because it's hot and I don't want to burn my hand, and held the clapper down for a minute, and then did the same thing to this side. See how well I can do this without burning my hand. I have no feeling left in my fingers sometimes. My husband swears. Okay. And then held it down. Now let's check it on the other side and see how close I got it to the middle. It's not perfect, but I think it's good. This side came up, I think, a little bit, but it will be fine. And then I'm going to come over and do another quick press. I'm fine with that. All of these are going to be under buttons. So then the instructions do say to come up here and whip stitch it closed. If I had to assume, it's just more probably to hold the garment in its correct place and make sure nothing happens with these until you get to the facing step to finish it all up. But these will be easily removable later. And then I came down this way, did my knot stitch to hold it, and I didn't even, like, I'm not weaving in the tail or anything because it's not getting, those stitches aren't staying. Don't have my thread scissors right here, but cut that off and then trim down this excess on all sides. And then, just for good measure, I turned it over again and pressed it one more time, and I think that looks pretty good. So I have 2 more to do, but these were definitely a learning curve. Like I said, I had to redo that first one twice. So anyway, let me go do the other 2 and then I'll check back. So I went ahead and did this side. I'm still not, again, 100% sure how I'm going to finish raw edges inside. I will cross that bridge later, but I'm going to quickly show you what I did. This is pretty cool. So this is the shoulder seam like I showed you up here, and this is where usually a bust dart would go, but as you see, it like completely is slashed all the way into the middle here. So what you do is I ran gathering stitches from the marking to here, and then matching up the edge seam here, I'm going to pin it to this marking flat and then pin it at the V flat, and then all of that excess will be gathered up into this area here, and then it's stitched down along the stitching line, and then once it's pressed down, there's a row of top stitching, but they called it shelf stitching. That's a new term for me. Like I said, this is my, well, I did the apron, but this is my first dress vintage pattern. So yeah, I think it looks really good. So I'm going to go ahead and do this front seam, and then that is where I'm going to have to call it for probably today. I'm going down to my son's high school to volunteer for lunch in a little bit, lunch coverage, so I have to go get ready. But I can get this done, and then I will probably be back tomorrow. I jumped straight into seaming up the shoulder seams at this point, and you'll notice a bias strip above the bust seam, and I just hand whipped that on to cover that edge. So that's how I decided to do the seam finishing at that point. I also, actually I'm doing the side seam right here, but it's the side seam and the shoulder seam, and I will address it shortly in another clip, but
This is also where I totally forgot to leave the whole left side seam open for a zipper, so I just blissfully unaware kept sewing all the way through both side seams. I will figure this out eventually. And then after I sewed all of that up, whether or not I was supposed to, I then went into sewing on the neck binding, which, again, that had issues, and I will address that in a second.
Good morning. It's the next day, and I worked on it a little bit yesterday. I spent a good portion of the time I was working fussing with the neck binding, and I had to rip it out like 5 times, and it just wanted to stretch me yesterday. But the neck binding is finally done, and overall I think it looks really, it's fine. I don't like the way it's puckering a little bit. Yeah, I've pressed and steamed and pressed and steamed, and there's a little bit of a wrinkle that I'm not the biggest fan of, but it's not a big deal, and I'm not doing it again. It's fine. Because I want to know if you can see here, if it'll focus. Yeah. See under there, all of partially where I had to do some seam ripping, and I don't know what it is about this sheet, but it doesn't like to go back to its previous form after you've taken a stitch out. I'm hoping that once it gets washed, after I finish it, that will go away. But I think this is partly why I'm starting with something like a cheap thrift store sheet, because I knew that this wasn't necessarily my typical pattern and that there were going to be some differences, and I have to figure it out. I will say that I do know how I will do it in the future when I make this pattern again that is slightly different, and I think it'll look the same when it's done, but it'll be a little bit better, I think. But yesterday I fell down the shoulder seams to encase the raw edges, which just involved me trimming the pink layer down to about 1/8 inch, and then I turned this over and then hand whip stitched that down. I'm probably going to do the same thing for the underarm seam to finish these raw edges as well. And to do that, I also had to rip out my basting stitches, which I'll have to do here as well. Here is where I have gotten on the sleeve. So this is the side that I'm almost done with. It's pinned, and I'm going to hand whip stitch this edge down. But this is what it had you do, and it's different than any other sleeve I've ever done. So it has the sleeve band here, and it has been folded in half with it. Well, the ends were sewn together, and then with the wrong sides together, it was basted in half, so that's a fold there. And then it was basted to the sleeve cap. So now I have the facing, and I've got to go pin it around with right sides together, and then stitch it, and its ends are sewn together here, and it had me turn up one edge, and then it's all turned out, and the seam that's sewn is pressed towards the bodice, and then that completely encases the raw edges. And then again, like I said a second ago, you whip stitch that edge down so that when you turn it right side out, but it's the sleeve cap, the sleeve band like that, with it finished on the inside. I hope that makes sense. But it's, like I said, different than anything I've ever done, so that's fun. So anyway, I'm gonna go get this sewn on and then do the ironing and pinning for that to get this one ready to go. And then for all of the whip stitching on both sleeves, I am probably gonna go sit and watch a movie while I'm working on that, and just because it's gonna take a while, and that's what I want to do. Alright y'all, I was really ready to come in here and be like, I finished the bodice portion, I'm moving on to the skirt, when I realized that I have made a really big mistake. So I was supposed to leave the left side of the bodice open for a zipper. And I forgot. Totally forgot. And I've completely beautifully fell down the seam. So what I think I'm gonna do is, call me crazy, but I think I'm gonna leave it because I can still put a zipper in here. It's not closed with a basting stitch, but I can still take the seam ripper to it and sew the zipper in with the seam in the middle, and then seam rip it up to the top of the zipper. I have basted the front two bodice pieces together at the base, at the waist, which is something that they said to do in the instructions. So the next thing is to start on the skirt. Woohoo! Finally! I still want to do a lining like I have done on the other dresses, because this is a very, very, very thin sheet and you can see through it. And I just don't want to have to wear a slip. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble the skirt, and then I will deal with a slip portion later. Well, I don't know what just happened to my voice, but edges are basted where they need to be at the V, and then I have sewn them with wrong sides together because I'm French seaming them. So right now it's wrong sides together, and then I trimmed the seam down to about 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to go press it out flat and then turn it, press it again, and then stitch it again, and now it's right sides together, and that is the French seam very quickly. But you can see so here's the waist, first tier, second tier, and then third tier all the way down here. So it's kind of fun to move around right now.
I don't know if I mentioned it, but I ran 2 rows of gathering stitches along the top of each of these sections, and then for gathering them to fit, all I did was pull from either side like I showed, matched up the center seam for the side, and then evened out the gathers that way, and then just sewed it down. And I did have to go back and remove some of the gathering stitches, like the bottom row of my gathering stitches, because you could see them on the outside of the skirt. And then just like the bodice, there was a shelf stitch that was done over the top of that on all of the gathers, and then I seamed up the center front and center back of the skirt in French seams the way I've done with the rest, and I'll talk about it later, but I'm going to eliminate this seam the next time I make the dress. And then I did the skirt portion under the skirt for the slip, where I did a turn and turn hem, just a basic French seam on that, and then sewed it to the bodice with the skirt. And the only thing I did for the seam finishing right there is just pink and shirred it, and then I sewed in the zipper. So the slip was a basic skirt, nothing fancy, but works.
Okay, it's not perfect, but the zipper is in. I'm gonna say that I didn't do it the way the instructions said to. There was some facing piece that was supposed to go in there, but because of my earlier mistake, these edges were already finished, and I just decided to go ahead and put it in. So I sewed it up to the zipper teeth on this side, and then did a little lap on the other side. And again, it's not perfect, but it's in there, and the waist seam lines up, which is really what I care about. And yeah, looks good.
For the hem, I just did another turn and turn. I took it over to the iron and pressed up the first edge, and then just took it back over to the sewing machine without pressing up the second edge because it's cotton. It folded really easily and it was pretty easy. Then the last thing for the actual dress was sewing on the buttons. I put that pin under the button to make sure that it left a little space, and then did a wrap around with the thread under the button before I knotted it, just to make sure that it sits nicely when I button it up. And then after that was jumping into making the, oh wait, not the belt quite yet. Then for the facing finishing, I will do this differently the next time, but I just sort of turned it under as best as I could and hand whipped it down on the bodice to finish that raw edge. And then I jumped into the belt, which was just putting the interfacing in the middle, ironing down the fabric over that interfacing, and then top stitching all the way around the edge, and putting the buckle on as I'm showing here, and then using the awl again to insert the eyelets for the holes for the belt. It did give a couple options for this. The eyelets was just the easy, not the eyelets, those things, because my brain is blanking right now. Anyway, that completed the belt.
Okay, final thoughts on this one. I love it overall. Like, I couldn't really be more pleased with this pattern. There are a couple adjustments that need to be made though. So one thing I don't like, and I've noticed that this is in the next vintage pattern I do as well, is that there's this center seam down the front of the skirt that really does seem kind of unnecessary to me, because the closures are on the side and I don't really like it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work with that the next time I make it and just cut the skirt piece on the fold to eliminate that seam. And I might do it for the back skirt as well, because again, there's also a center back seam in the back panel, and the side seams are what I need open. So I'm gonna do that. I did that with the next dress I made because I noticed that on it as well, and so I went ahead and prepared for doing the skirt on the fold. I don't know if that's because back in the 50s fabric was not wide enough. I don't know. Haven't done enough historical research on that to know why there might be those unnecessary seams there, but I don't like them. That's really the only thing I don't like about the dress. The buttonholes were probably the most unique part of this thing that I learned how to do, and I love them. So I'm looking forward to doing them again. I already have the next fabric lined up for this dress because I love this dress so much and I want to make it again. And while I absolutely love this, again, you know, I believe I said that I'm a winter, so muted colors wash me out a little bit more, and I really don't wear makeup that often, so it just, and I don't really want to feel like I necessarily need to, but the fabric that I found this time, like, I think I was most excited about this find at the thrift store because it was actually the vibrant colors with floral that I look good in, and I know I look good in, and those are a little bit tougher to find at the thrift store, so I was really, really excited. And yes, it's already planned into another one of these, so I'll show that. I don't know if I'll do another video on this dress pattern, but I'll definitely show the dress itself once it's done. I love the length of it, like the fit. I was very worried about where the waist came down because, you know, I've been through 4 pregnancies, and things just don't sit the way they used to. So, you know, I was always a little worried about it, but it actually works really well. So I'm really pleased. The other thing that I need to change is, so I have a few more of these belt buckles, which is good because this one broke in the process of this because it had too much strain on it. And it is a Dritz branded one, so I expected it to be a little bit sturdier, but it really is for show, I guess. So I found a big bag of them all still in their original packaging, just on a shelf at a thrift store, and there was heart ones, there were circle ones, there were square ones. I think those are the 3 shapes, and there's like a pink one and the green one, and then there was some multicolored ones, and they're really, really, really pretty. Yeah, I just really liked the green with this, but when I was wearing it on Easter, I was squatting down to help my boys with something, and I guess that just put a little bit too much strain on that middle piece there, and it just popped off. So I was really disappointed. I did super glue it with Gorilla Glue and then E6000 on top of the glue, once the super glue dried. So I was able to put it back on enough to film the video. I don't know how actually usable it is, but also for me not to have any tension on it width-wise, I have to use it on this very last hole. So when I make it again next time, I'm just going to make the belt longer because I like it a little bit longer, and I'll put the first hole a little further down, and it should fit better and not put that tension when I bend over to help my kids with something. Because I don't like, the belt isn't cinching the dress up any. It literally is just sitting there, but the added tension of sitting down or bending over, you know, it doesn't stay quite as flat as it does when you're standing up. So it just popped it. So anyway, I was also debating on whether to make another belt for this dress anyway, with the pink that I used as the lining, just as a contrast. So I probably will do that. But I mean, it looks adorable with the belt. I love it with the belt. So I'm gonna have to make that work and make sure I don't pop any more center pieces out. So yeah, the other big thing that was a problem is when I need to bring this part of the seam up into my armpit a little bit more, because without putting any tension on the dress, this is as far as I can lift my arm. Which, if I'm just, you know, walking around trying to look pretty or whatever, that's not a problem. But the reality of my life meant I was on the floor helping my boys with button-up shirts, and just with all of what I was doing and getting, you know, food on the table for kids, I was raising my arms up, so both of these seams popped before the morning was up. So I had to go back in and re-sew these seams and give them extra stitching and fortify them a little bit more. So I think the best thing that I can do, and I'm not sure that that's something that, because I did make a mock-up of this, but I don't think that that was something that I was going to figure out necessarily in the mock-up, because sitting here it's fine, but it was when I was actually doing my job as a mom that it wasn't. So I'll just angle those up a little bit more into my armpit to give myself a little bit more range of motion. But that is the other big thing. I did not actually put pockets in this one, and I kind of regret that already. And so the next time I make it, I will be adding side pockets, but eliminating that center front and back seam. So those are my thoughts on this dress pattern. Otherwise, like, I really don't have very many complaints about it. Otherwise, it's so comfortable. It fits so well. I didn't really have to do too much modification to the pattern itself, and it's so elegant. It's so beautiful. So thank you for joining me for yet another one of my summer plans. I look forward to showing you the next vintage pattern. I'm really excited about that one. It's kind of unique, and I think it's the one that ties on the shoulder and has different ways you can tie the top. So I'm really excited to dive into that one. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love for you to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.